Major essay project number 2. So I'm going to go ahead and read through this prompt, and I will pause and elaborate as things come up. So come along with me, won't you? In On Confronting the Unknown, Richard E. Miller and N. Jurecic write that the writing prompt, properly conceived, is an invitation to embark into unmapped worlds, to improvise, to find unexpected beauty in the challenges that arise. In this essay project, we are challenged to write a research-based argument of at least 6 full pages that explores a particular aspect of a topic that genuinely interests us. Typically, in a research-based essay, we may be tempted to choose a position in a debate and find evidence to support our position. This model is the basis for the 5-paragraph essay, a model we are no longer using. However, as Miller and Jurecic explain in Habits of the Creative Mind, we know that practicing argument as debate produces writing that isn't persuasive or compelling or interesting to read. So in our classes, we ask our students to think of essay writing as a speculative journey. What's the difference? When you write speculatively, you begin not with a predetermined destination, your thesis, but with the goal of answering a question or solving a problem. You consider different routes to get to this goal. You do research and rethink your plan. You learn more and more. You write, make mistakes, and head off in new and unanticipated directions. You make discoveries. Your paper is your attempt to come to some kind of answer to your question. How are you putting pieces of information together to create new meaning? How are you connecting different ideas together to create new ideas? Let's stop here and comment on this a little bit. So, as you'll recall, On Confronting the Unknown was one of the first essays from Habits of the Creative Mind that we read. And to review that, that was the essay that Miller and Jurecic focused on the book Deep Survival by Lawrence Gonzalez. And in that book, he profiles a case where a young girl was falling out of a crashing airplane. And the reason that she survived, at least according to Gonzalez's estimation, is that she didn't come up with a predetermined destination of what was going to happen to her. She didn't just sit down and say, I'm going to die, therefore I'm going to just sit here and die. No, she treated this as an unmapped experience, an open adventure, albeit a very dire and scary and life-threatening adventure, of course, but all the same, still an unmapped adventure, right? She didn't just sit down and say, I'm going to die. She continued on even though she didn't know what was going to happen, and he attributes that to why she survived, right? So we're applying the same idea to our writing. Of course, writing is a very different situation than falling out of a crashing airplane, but some of us might feel like that when we're writing an essay. So this quotation comes from the essay called On Argument as Journey, and this is something that we will be reading in the coming days. So if this doesn't really make sense at this point, at the time of watching this video, if you haven't read the section yet, don't worry, it should make more sense after you've read that. But essentially what Miller and Jurecic are talking about here is they're encouraging us to practice argument as journey, treating it as a speculative journey rather than argument as debate, right? So in a debate, what we're trying to do is win. We're trying to prove that we're right. But I tend to agree with Miller and Jurecic. That doesn't end up producing very good writing. It actually is a machine for producing writing that's not very interesting and just kind of turns the readers off. But when we're practicing writing as a speculative journey, we're taking our readers on this adventure. We're showing them how we put these different pieces together from the different sources from our research in order to create new meaning, right? And so we're just kind of taking them along on this adventure. So this is what this essay is encouraging us to do, right? And so we're going to want to have some kind of open-ended question that's going to propel our research, right? When we have an open-ended question, one that's not very easily answered, we need to try to figure out how to answer that. And in order to do so, we need to consult a wide variety of sources and perspectives. We need to think about it. We need to write about it. Takes a little bit of time, right? And there could be any number of valid responses to that question just based on how you're putting the pieces together, right? So let's go ahead and continue. The goal for this writing project is not to try to convince or persuade your readers that your position is right. When released from the burden of trying to persuade our readers, we can then use our writing as a way of learning for us, which ultimately is one of the most important purposes of writing. This will also influence the tone you take in your essay. Seek to build an invitational tone, not a confrontational, adversarial, or arrogant tone. So this goes back to this up here, talking about argument as debate versus argument as a speculative journey. Argument as debate is going to usually force us to have a confrontational, adversarial, or even arrogant tone because we're trying to prove that we're right about something. On the other hand, when we are using writing as a way of learning, when we're trying to use it as a way to make meaning and to put pieces together, and when we're taking our readers on that adventure with us, we often have what's called an invitational tone, where we're inviting them to come along on this essay adventure with us, right? And that tends to turn readers on versus off. This stuff is what's going to turn your readers off. But also, more importantly, when we're using writing as a speculative journey, we're also using it as a way of learning. That's more important. When we're writing in the 5-paragraph essay model, we're not using writing as a way of learning. We're just trying to find sources that confirm what we already think, right? And so this right here, we're trying to embark on an open-ended adventure in a lot of respects. You're trying to find the different pieces of research to help you come to some kind of satisfactory answer to your question. Okay, let's begin, or continue on. Begin by doing some exploratory research about a topic that interests you. An event, a concept or idea, a cultural phenomenon, or potential solutions to a problem. As Miller and Jurecic suggest in their book, begin in a state of not knowing, rather than committing yourself to a claim you came up with before you've done any curiosity-driven research. After a while, questions about this topic should arise. Craft an open-ended question about your topic. Open-ended questions can't be easily answered and require careful research and consideration. Embrace confusion and complexity. Don't shy away from the gray areas of an issue. So let's comment on this. So this quotation comes from the essay called On Writing to a Question, which we'll be reading in week 3 this week, or at least the week I'm recording this video. So if this doesn't really quite make sense at this point, read that section and then hopefully it'll become a little bit clearer. But we want to begin in a state of not knowing, meaning we don't have that predetermined outcome that we're just trying to find sources to support. We're beginning in a state where we don't have the answers, and so therefore we need to conduct research in order to try to find the answers. And so that's what we mean by having an open-ended question. Open-ended questions are not very easily answered. You can't just type it into Google and find the answer. That would be a close-ended question, right? An open-ended question could have any number of valid responses just based on the research, based on how a person is putting the pieces together, based on perspectives, based on analysis. All different things go into crafting a response to an open-ended question. And one reasonable person could have one response to the question, and another reasonable person could have a different response, right? And they both could be equally as valid just based on how they put the pieces together. So the open-ended question that you're trying to answer is what's going to propel you in your research, because you're trying to find the answer to that, right? And in order to do this effectively, we want to embrace confusion. When we embrace confusion, it means that we go toward the things that confuse us, and then when we try to do that, we ultimately learn because we're trying to figure out how to be unconfused by it, right? And so therefore we're more apt to try to learn from it. And we want to embrace complexity, so don't look for things that are easy or simple. And don't shy away from the gray areas of an issue. And this is really important. Rarely is an issue just black or white. There is more often than not a whole range of different perspectives, different ideas in a given issue, right? It's very rarely just all the way to one extreme or all the way to the other. Usually there's a whole host of different things in the middle. So we want to look at that stuff. We want to look at the middle stuff as well. We are challenged to incorporate material from at least 6 credible and relevant texts, 4 of which should be found using the library's online databases. Gale ebooks and opposing viewpoints are good starting points. They are useful for providing background information and pointing us in the direction of other sources, but also use EBSCOhost to find some of your sources. How can you work with the words of others to promote thinking new thoughts? So just a comment on this, I'm going to have resources and videos that will walk you through how to use these online databases from Cypress College's library, or from the library's website, and that will make things like Gale ebooks and opposing viewpoints clearer. So if you've never heard of those things or never heard of EBSCOhost, don't worry, I'm going to show you how to access those databases, how to use them, so that you can find at least 4 of your sources using the library's online databases. Now the reason I want you to find at least 4 of your sources from the online databases and not just say, well, good luck on Google, have fun, is because the library's databases, you can pretty much guarantee that the sources you find will be credible and relevant, have some sort of substance to them, whereas just on the regular old internet, anybody can post anything about whatever they want, whether it's true or not, right? And we want to make sure that our sources are going to be credible, they're going to be relevant, and they're going to be substantive. They're going to help us with our research, right? Before committing to a topic, think about your own interests in the world. What are your career goals? What are your hobbies? What sparks your curiosity and imagination? Topics that we have a personal stake in tend to be more interesting to research and write about, and consequently more interesting for our audience to read about. Rather than researching the topic generally, however, try to find a specific conflict, issue, or question within this topic. We want to be as narrow and specific as we can for such a short paper. So, in order to get started, start with what you are already interested in, okay? So what do you care about in the world? Are there certain issues that you care about or are concerned with? What are your career goals? What are you hoping to study or to do after you graduate college? What are you studying to become, or what are you hoping to go into, which career field? Why do you want to go into that? Are there certain controversies or issues within that career field? That might be something worth researching and writing about. What are your hobbies? Are you interested in certain sports or activities? Are there certain issues or controversies within any of those different hobbies that you have? So any number of possibilities. What sparks your curiosity and imagination? It's really important that you research a topic you truly care about. Because again, not only will it make it more enjoyable for you as the writer, it will also make it more enjoyable for your reader, because that interest will come through in the writing. Don't choose a topic that you think is going to be easy or you think I want to read about. Okay, that's actually going to make it harder on yourself. Because when you choose a topic you think is going to be easy and you don't really care about it, you just want to get it over with. Usually it's going to be a miserable experience because you hate the topic. You're not interested in it, right? So make sure it's something you truly care about. Note: there are certain topics that we may not write about, not because they are unimportant issues, but because they tend to lead us into dogmatic or ideological corners that are hard to get out of. These topics include whether abortion is moral or immoral, or should be legal or illegal, whether gun control is good or bad, whether we should have the death penalty, whether immigration is good or bad, and whether a God or afterlife exists, among a few others. The arguments for these issues tend to be repetitive. If you have a particular angle regarding one of these topics that you think will lead you into new territory, let's talk about it first. All topics should be approved before you begin the composition of your essay. So just a note on this, like I say up here, it's not because these are unimportant issues. They are very important indeed, and that's why they continue to be points of debate, even decades and decades and decades and decades later, right? The issue is, though, the problem is that a lot of times we tend to argue from dogmatic or ideological corners or positions, and we're not willing to budge, right? We think what we think, and it doesn't matter what other people think. We're not going to change, right? But that's then going back up to that argument as debate style, right? The basis of the 5-paragraph essay, and we're trying to break out of that. So I want you to avoid these topics. We don't want to write about them. Again, not because they're not important, but because they tend to kind of by default push us into the argument as debate style. So, however, guess what? The whole rest of the cosmos is your playground. You can find any number of topics to write about, just not these few. This essay project is your chance to put into practice all of the concepts we've been reading and learning about so far this semester, and to challenge our capabilities as writers, students, and thinkers. Be sure to review your notes and reread important selections we've covered from Habits of the Creative Mind. Resist your familiar habits and practices as writers, try something new and exciting, follow your curiosity, take risks, and attempt to have fun while composing this essay. So again, these are important things to do to help us use writing as a mode of learning. Okay, I'm going to end this video because we're getting a little long here, so I'm going to pick it up in the next video and we'll go through the challenges and the due dates, etc. So stay tuned, y'all.